Listen closely, there's a whisper from 4,000 years ago, carried on crumbling clay tablets. He who has seen everything, I will make known to the lands. These haunting words open the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving masterpiece, a story so ancient it predates the pyramids, the Bible, even the concept of writing itself. But what if I told you this epic isn't just a myth? Hidden within its lines are secrets, codes, forgotten histories, and messages meant only for the initiated. Today, we're pulling back the veil on 25 astonishing mysteries woven into this legendary tale, each one more mind-bending than the last. Picture this, a king, 2/3 god, 1/3 man, raging against mortality, battling monsters, and venturing into the underworld. Gilgamesh's epic feels like pure fantasy until you start noticing the patterns. The flood story eerily mirroring Noah's Ark, the precise astronomical alignments buried in the text, the sudden shifts in language that hint at lost fragments of history. This isn't just poetry, it's a time capsule, a puzzle waiting to be solved, and the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. The ancients weren't just telling stories. They were hiding truth, so why does this matter now? Because Gilgamesh isn't just some relic, it's a mirror. It asks the same questions we still wrestle with today. What does it mean to be human? Can we cheat death? How do we live with purpose? Over the next minutes, we'll decode symbols that have baffled scholars for centuries, uncover the real-world events that may have inspired the epic, and even explore the chilling possibility that Gilgamesh himself was more than a legend. This is more than a history lesson, it's a detective story, and you're part of the investigation, ready to step into the shadows of the world's first great adventure. The first secret hidden within the Epic of Gilgamesh might shake the very foundations of what you thought you knew about ancient history. Buried in the 11th tablet of this 4,000-year-old epic lies a flood story so strikingly similar to the tale of Noah's Ark that it forces us to rethink everything. Here's the bombshell: this version wasn't written centuries after the Bible. It predates it by more than 1,000 years. Picture Utnapishtim, the Noah of this ancient tale, receiving a clandestine warning from the gods: tear down your house, build a colossal boat, and load it with every living creature. Sound familiar? The parallels don't stop there. Just like Noah, Utnapishtim releases birds to scout for dry land, first a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven that never returns. The details are uncanny, down to the boat's precise dimensions and the rainbow symbolizing divine mercy after the waters recede. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Scholars have traced this narrative even further back to the Sumerian Eridu Genesis, written around 2600 BC. That's older than the pyramids. So why does this matter? Because it rewrites the story of storytelling itself. This isn't about who copied whom, it's about humanity's shared memory, a cataclysmic event so traumatic it echoed across cultures for millennia. Some researchers point to evidence of massive flooding in the Tigris-Euphrates region around 7,000 years ago, a real-world disaster that could have seeded these myths. The implications are profound. If these stories existed long before the Bible, what does that say about the nature of divine revelation? Are these myths, or could they be distorted retellings of an actual prehistoric catastrophe? The Epic of Gilgamesh doesn't just challenge religious dogma, it invites us to consider how history, myth, and truth intertwine across the ages, and this is only the first secret. Gilgamesh's desperate quest for immortality seems like pure myth until you examine the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia with a historian's eye. Beneath the surface of this epic adventure lies a startling political reality. Kings of this era weren't just rulers, they were carefully crafting godlike personas to cement their power. Look at the historical record. Rulers like Naram-Sin of Akkad declared themselves living gods centuries before Gilgamesh's story was written down. His victory stele literally shows him wearing divine horns, towering over mere mortals. Now consider Gilgamesh's journey through this lens. His divine bloodline, 2/3 God, 1/3 man, wasn't poetic license. It was political propaganda. The epic describes how he crossed the waters of death, seeking the secret of eternal life from Utnapishtim. But in the real world, Mesopotamian kings performed elaborate rituals to symbolically conquer death. The Akitu festival, for instance, reenacted the god's victory over chaos with the king playing the starring role. Most revealing is what happens when Gilgamesh finally fails his immortality test. He can't stay awake for 7 days. This echoes actual royal purification rituals where staying awake demonstrated divine favor. The message: even this semi-divine king couldn't cheat mortality, yet his divine connection still set him above ordinary people. Archaeological evidence backs this up. The Sumerian king list, a real historical document, blurs the line between myth and reality, listing some rulers as reigning for impossibly long periods. One king is said to have ruled for 43,000 years. This wasn't history, it was political theater, telling subjects their rulers weren't like other men. So was Gilgamesh's epic just ancient PR? Partly. But it also reveals how deeply these rulers believed their own mythology. When you hold power in a world where gods control floods and famines, claiming divine ancestry isn't just useful, it's survival. The irony: while Gilgamesh fails to become immortal in the story, his name has lasted longer than any Mesopotamian king's actual dynasty. Now that's political legacy. The monster Humbaba isn't just some terrifying creature from ancient myth. His grotesque face hides a disturbing secret about how Mesopotamians saw the world. When the epic describes his features as coiled intestines, we're not just dealing with creative monster making. This was a deliberate callback to haruspicy, the sacred practice of reading animal entrails to predict the future. Dig into any temple record from Babylon or Nineveh, and you'll find liver models used to train priests in divination. The logic was simple. Since gods controlled all things, they could send messages through nature's patterns, especially in the organs of sacrificed animals. The liver's lobes, the spleen's shape, the way intestines folded, each twist and bulge held cosmic significance. Now reread Humbaba's description with that context. His face isn't just horrifying, it's a living omen, a walking prophecy. This changes everything about Gilgamesh's battle with him. The epic says Humbaba guards the Cedar Forest wearing 7 layers of terror like armor. 7 wasn't random, it was the most potent magical number in Mesopotamia, tied to the 7 visible planets and the 7 gates of the underworld. By slaying Humbaba, Gilgamesh isn't just defeating a monster. He's dismantling the god's ability to send warnings, literally cutting through divine messages like a priest slicing open a sacrificial lamb. Archaeology confirms how seriously they took this. At Mari, excavators found a clay model of sheep lungs covered in cuneiform notes about omens. One entry warns, if the liver lacks a lobe, the king will lose his throne. No wonder Humbaba's face terrified warriors. He wasn't just a foe. He was the embodiment of fate itself, his very visage whispering the god's plans, the chilling implication. While we see Humbaba as fantasy to ancient audiences, he was as real as the diviners in their temples. His defeat wasn't heroism, it was hubris, disrupting the sacred channels between heaven and earth. And that arrogance would cost Gilgamesh dearly in the tragedies to come. The Cedar Forest where Gilgamesh confronts Humbaba wasn't just a fantastical setting, it was likely a real place, and the clues are hiding in plain sight. Across multiple tablets, the epic describes this mythical woodland as a land of the living, its towering cedars so precious they reach the heavens. But here's what most translations leave out. Mesopotamian texts outside the epic constantly mention cedar imports from the west, specifically the Amanus Mountains in modern-day Turkey and Lebanon's legendary cedar groves. These weren't just any trees, they were the gold of the ancient world. Excavations at sites like Ebla in Syria reveal something astonishing. Royal archives detail how Mesopotamian kings sent military expeditions to secure cedar logs, with one tablet boasting of mountains felled like enemies. The timber was so coveted it became a status symbol. Palace doors, temple roofs, even thrones were made from it. When the epic describes Humbaba as the forest's guardian, it's echoing a harsh reality. These groves were fiercely protected by local tribes who resisted foreign loggers. But the smoking gun, scientific analysis, tree ring studies of surviving ancient cedar beams match growth patterns from Lebanon's forests during Gilgamesh's supposed reign. Even more telling, pollen records show a sudden decline in cedar around 2600 BCE, right when Mesopotamian demand spiked. The epic might mythologize the conflict, but the environmental evidence suggests a brutal truth. Gilgamesh's heroic conquest could reflect actual ecological pillaging disguised as legend. Why does this matter? Because it transforms how we read the story. Humbaba isn't just a monster, he's the voice of the forest itself, a symbol of nature's wrath against exploitation. When Gilgamesh beheads him and hangs his face on a cedar, it's not victory. It's a warning etched in timber. Civilization's progress often comes at nature's expense. And 4,000 years later, Lebanon's last ancient cedars, some over 3,000 years old, stand as silent witnesses to humanity's oldest war against the wild. When Ishtar offers to make Gilgamesh her husband, it's not a love story, it's a trap disguised as divine favor. The goddess of war and fertility doesn't just bring passion, she brings chaos. The epic spells it out with terrifying clarity. Every lover she's ever taken meets a gruesome end. One becomes a wolf howling in agony, another turns into a mole condemned to crawl in darkness. A third is transformed into a statue frozen in torment. This isn't romance, it's a cosmic cautionary tale. But there's far more here than just mythological drama. Ishtar's fickleness mirrors Mesopotamia's most visceral terror, the uncontrollable fury of nature itself. She isn't just a capricious deity. She's the personification of sudden floods that erase cities, droughts that wither crops, and storms that appear without warning. Ancient texts like The Descent of Ishtar reveal her dual nature. She both nourishes the land and unleashes plagues. When Gilgamesh rejects her, listing her victims like a prosecutor, he's not just insulting a goddess. He's daring to defy the unpredictable forces that governed his world. The consequences are immediate and brutal. Ishtar demands her father, Anu, unleash the bull of heaven, a creature whose very breath splits open the earth. This isn't just poetic exaggeration. Cuneiform records describe real disasters with similar imagery. A tablet from recounts a catastrophic storm where the god's bull, likely a metaphor for thunder, tore the land like a garment. The bull's death in the epic, ripped apart by Gilgamesh and Enkidu, isn't just a heroic feat. It's a symbolic rebellion against divine wrath with dire repercussions. Here's the chilling twist. Ishtar's curse on Enkidu, which ultimately kills him, reflects a deep-seated Mesopotamian belief. To them, disasters weren't random. They were divine retribution for human arrogance. When Gilgamesh mocks Ishtar, standing atop Uruk's walls he built to defy the god's chaos, he's replaying humanity's oldest conflict, our struggle to control a world that refuses to be tamed. The epic's message is clear. Even kings are pawns in the gods' games, and nature always has the last word. At the edge of the world in the Epic of Gilgamesh stand the scorpion people, creatures so terrifying that their glance is death. But these aren't just random monsters. Their placement at the twin peaks of Mashu reveals something extraordinary, a sophisticated understanding of astronomy hidden within the epic. When Gilgamesh approaches them, the text specifies they guard the place where the sun rises and sets, a phrase that mirrors precise Babylonian star maps tracking the sun's annual journey. Recent studies of cuneiform astronomical tablets show why this matters. The Babylonians divided the sky into three paths: the northern, middle, and southern bands where celestial bodies traveled. The sun's lowest path in winter, the southern band, was called the Way of E, associated with the underworld, and here's the key. This path passed through the constellation we now call Scorpius. To ancient observers, the scorpion's claws literally framed the sun's winter solstice position, marking its symbolic death and rebirth. Now re-examine the scorpion people's dialogue with Gilgamesh. They ask why a mortal would seek this forbidden path, warning that no one survives 12 leagues of darkness in the tunnel beneath the mountains. That number isn't arbitrary. Babylonian astronomy divided the night into 12 double hours, with the darkest period, midnight, seen as the sun's underworld passage. Their warning mirrors an astronomical reality. The sun spent 12 hours below the horizon during winter solstice, the year's longest night. But the connections grow deeper. Funerary texts from contemporaneous cultures describe scorpion guardians guiding souls through the afterlife, a motif found from Egypt to Mesopotamia. A recently translated tablet from Sippar even depicts scorpion-tailed deities flanking the sun god Shamash as he judges the dead. This suggests Gilgamesh's encounter wasn't just mythological decor. It encoded an entire cosmology where the boundary between earth and heaven wasn't just physical but celestial. The chilling implication: when the scorpion people permit Gilgamesh to pass, they're allowing him temporary access to the sun god's secrets, a privilege reserved for deities. His subsequent failure to gain immortality becomes even more poignant. He'd touched the machinery of the cosmos itself, yet remained bound by mortal limits. The stars could be mapped, but their ultimate mystery stayed just beyond human grasp. Utnapishtim's name isn't just a label, it's a loaded cipher, a key to understanding one of the epic's most profound mysteries. Translated as "he who saw life" or "he found life," those syllables carry the weight of an entire civilization's obsession with cheating death. Compare this to Gilgamesh's own title, "He who saw the deep," a reference to his quest for wisdom, not immortality. The distinction is deliberate. Utnapishtim doesn't just possess eternal life, he's become synonymous with it, his very name a testament to what Gilgamesh so desperately craves but can never attain. Dig into the Akkadian roots and the layers deepen. Utu means sun, while Napashtu refers to breathe or life essence. Together, they paint Utnapishtim as more than a survivor. He's a fusion of solar divinity and human vitality, a being who's crossed the boundary between mortal and eternal. This wasn't just poetry. Mesopotamian kings routinely linked themselves to solar deities in inscriptions, claiming to walk in the radiance of Shamash. Yet here's the irony: no historical king ever claimed Utnapishtim's fate. The message was clear: immortality was for flood heroes favored by gods, not for rulers, no matter how powerful. The contrast with Gilgamesh's fate is brutal. After his fruitless journey, he returns to Uruk empty-handed, his only consolation the city walls he built, a metaphor for human achievement within mortal limits. Tablet 12 drives the point home. When Enkidu's ghost tells Gilgamesh of the underworld, he describes a place where dust is their food, clay their sustenance. No sugarcoating here. Death wasn't a gateway to paradise, it was a grim, egalitarian equalizer. Even the mightiest king would become a shivering shade, his bones gnawed by cold. This duality, Utnapishtim's transcendence versus Gilgamesh's resignation, mirrors Mesopotamia's own conflicted theology. On one hand, texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim's earlier incarnation, suggest the gods created humans as mortal laborers precisely to avoid competition. On the other, royal hymns boast of kings approaching divinity through ritual. The epic reconciles this tension by showing both possibilities, Utnapishtim as the exception, Gilgamesh as the rule. Perhaps most revealing is what Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh when he fails the immortality test. You toiled without pause, and what did you get? Exhaustion. It's a stinging critique of human striving itself. In a world where even the gods grew weary, as seen in the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, perpetual life wasn't a reward. It was a cosmic joke, a burden only the chosen few could bear. Utnapishtim's name, then, isn't just a title. It's a mirror held up to Gilgamesh's and, by extension, humanity's futile hunger for the impossible. The underworld in the Epic of Gilgamesh isn't some vague, shadowy realm. It's a chillingly organized bureaucracy, a celestial civil service where even death follows strict social rankings. When Enkidu's ghost describes his torment in Tablet 12, he doesn't speak of demons or fiery pits. Instead, he paints a picture shockingly familiar to any Mesopotamian. A system where your afterlife depends on how many sons remembered your name, whether you received proper burial rites, and even what kind of bread was offered at your funeral. This wasn't mythic invention. Excavated burial sites across Mesopotamia confirm these beliefs. At Ur's royal cemetery, archaeologists found tombs stocked with food vessels, jewelry, and even board games provisions for the afterlife. But here's the gut punch. Common graves nearby held nothing but a single clay bowl. The epic codifies this brutal truth in Enkidu's lament. The man who died in battle, his ghost has a chair by the gods. The man with 7 sons, his ghost feasts among the flames, but the ghost who has no one to remember him, he eats scraps from the garbage of the underworld. The hierarchy gets darker. Enkidu describes ghosts suffering not for moral failings but for social ones. Stillborn babies forever clutch empty breasts. The unmarried dead wander aimlessly. Warriors slain without proper burial claw at the underworld's gates like beggars. This mirrors actual Mesopotamian legal texts, like the laws of Ur-Nammu, where proper burial was a legislated right, and neglecting ancestors' offerings could land you in court. What makes this revelation so unsettling is how it mirrors their living world. Just as kings, priests, and laborers occupied fixed ranks in society, so too did their ghosts. A recently translated Babylonian tablet lists underworld taxes owed by the dead. Yes, taxes paid in ceremonial loaves and libations. Failed to keep up payments and your ghost plummeted to the lower levels. The cruelest twist, Gilgamesh, for all his power, can't save Enkidu from this fate. His offerings of honey and jewels mean nothing without living descendants to maintain them. In the end, even the mightiest king bows to death's ledger, a system where legacy wasn't measured in monuments but in the hands that kept your memory alive. Deep in the Persian Gulf's murky waters, Gilgamesh finds a thorny prize, the plant of rejuvenation, a secret so potent it can restore a man's youth. Yet before he can taste its power, a serpent steals it away. This fleeting moment hides a startling possibility. What if this mythical plant wasn't just folklore, but a coded reference to opium, the ancient world's closest thing to magic? The clues are buried in botany and trade routes. Opium poppies grew wild across Mesopotamia, their bulbous seed pods eerily resembling the epic's description of a plant, like a boxthorn with prickly fruit. By Gilgamesh's era, Sumerians were already calling poppies hul-gil, the joy plant, grinding their sap into medicines that eased pain and induced euphoria. Temple reliefs from this period show deities clutching poppy heads, while medical tablets prescribe opium mixtures for everything from sleeplessness to grief. But here's where it gets fascinating. The epic specifies Gilgamesh retrieves the plant by tying stones to his feet and diving deep, a method mirroring actual pearl harvesting techniques from the Gulf. This wasn't random. The Dilmun civilization, modern-day Bahrain, was a hub for both pearls and opium trade. Archaeologists have found poppy residue in Bronze Age vessels there, suggesting these waters literally connected the plant's myth and reality. The serpent's role takes on new meaning too. In Mesopotamian art, snakes often symbolize healing. Ningishida, the god of medicine, wears serpents coiled around his staff. Could the epic be encoding a bitter medical truth? Opium brought temporary relief, but addiction stole its promise, just as the snake stole Gilgamesh's hope. The tragic irony resonates today. Our oldest hero's quest mirrors humanity's endless search for quick fixes, whether in myth or medicine. Some secrets, it seems, are destined to slip through our fingers. When the bull of heaven charges down from the skies in the Epic of Gilgamesh, its fury isn't just mythological drama, it's a chilling reflection of environmental catastrophe seared into Mesopotamia's collective memory. This celestial beast, sent by Ishtar to punish Gilgamesh's defiance, doesn't merely trample crops, it dries up the rivers and scorches the land, descriptions that match real climate disasters etched into ancient clay records. A tablet from the reign of Ibbi-Sin, a king of Ur around 2000 BC, recounts an eerily similar calamity. The storms of heaven turned the earth to dust, and the womb of the land could not bear grain. Scientists analyzing sediment cores from the Tigris-Euphrates region found evidence of sudden aridification around this period, with layers of wind-blown silt suggesting prolonged droughts. But there's another possibility, one written in the stars. Astronomers studying Babylonian observation tablets have noted a peculiar entry from 2340 BC, describing a bright torch of heaven that rained fire upon the earth. Could this be a comet? The timing aligns with carbon-dated evidence of a potential airburst event, a meteor exploding in the atmosphere that left microscopic glass spherules in Syrian soil. Such an event would have unleashed wildfires, followed by years of climate disruption as dust blocked sunlight. Now re-examine the bull of heaven's description. Its fiery breath splits open the earth, while its death causes a rainstorm so violent it floods the streets of Uruk. This duality, fire and flood, mirrors the sequence of comet-induced disasters, first intense heat, then abrupt cooling and deluges as atmospheric moisture condensed. The most haunting clue comes from the bull's celestial identity. In Mesopotamia, the constellation Taurus wasn't just a bull. It was specifically associated with the storm god Adad, who controlled rain and drought. When Ishtar demands her father Anu release the bull, she's invoking this cosmic link between heavenly signs and earthly suffering. What makes this revelation profound is how it reframes Gilgamesh's struggle. His battle isn't just against a goddess's wrath, it's humanity's first recorded confrontation with an indifferent cosmos, where divine punishment and natural disaster blur into one terrifying force. And in a world where kings claim to mediate between gods and people, the bull's rampage exposed a brutal truth: even rulers were powerless against the sky's fury. Gilgamesh's legendary lineage, 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal, sounds like pure mythology. But what if this bizarre ratio hides a whisper of truth, a distorted memory of humanity's ancient past? Modern genetics reveals that early Homo sapiens interbred with Neanderthals, absorbing roughly 2 to 3% of their DNA. That percentage may seem small, but here's where it gets eerie. Some populations carried significantly higher traces, with certain genes influencing everything from immune responses to hair texture. Could the epic's strange fractions encode a primordial recognition of this otherness within us? Take a closer look at how the text describes Gilgamesh's nature. He's not just strong, he's unnaturally so, with stamina and power surpassing ordinary men. This mirrors Neanderthal traits reconstructed from fossil evidence: denser bones, greater muscle mass, and adaptations for extreme cold. Even his notorious arrogance fits. Neanderthals had larger cranial capacity than modern humans, potentially making them more intelligent in ways we don't yet understand. To early agricultural societies encountering their remains in caves, might these giants of old have been remembered as a semi-divine race? The epic compounds this mystery by specifying Gilgamesh's mother as the goddess Ninsun, while his father is the mortal king Lugalbanda. This echoes a pattern found in myths worldwide. Human offspring of gods often exhibit traits we now associate with archaic hominins: extraordinary strength, unusual appearance, or connection to wild places. The ancient Greeks told similar tales about demigods like Heracles, whose exploits mirror Gilgamesh's. Coincidence or a shared cultural memory of encounters with other human species? Fascinatingly, archaeological sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq, home to Neanderthal burials adorned with flowers, sit mere miles from where Gilgamesh's story was first written. These flower burials suggest sophistication and ritual, blurring the line between beast and divine. To the Sumerians discovering such graves centuries later, might the bones of these thick-browed ancestors have seemed like relics of a lost godly race? The implications ripple deeper. Genetic studies show Neanderthal DNA influences modern traits like pain tolerance and susceptibility to diseases, attributes that could have seemed superhuman to ancient observers. Even the epic's description of Enkidu, Gilgamesh's wild counterpart, fits, covered in hair, living among beasts yet profoundly strong. Both characters might represent distorted memories of encounters with others who weren't quite human but not quite gods either. This isn't to say the epic's authors understood genetics, but oral traditions have preserved astonishingly accurate details across millennia. The Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, for example, describe geographic features matching landscapes submerged 12,000 years ago. Could Gilgamesh's divine fraction be another such relic, a numerical echo of our tangled ancestry, preserved in myth like a fossil in clay? The real revelation here isn't just about Gilgamesh. It's about how myths might encode truth science is only now uncovering. When the epic claims its hero carried the blood of gods, perhaps it was grasping at something real, the indelible mark left by those who walked before us, their legacy woven into our very cells. The cracks in tablet Roman 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh aren't just physical, they're fractures in history itself. This so-called deluge tablet, containing the ancient world's most famous flood story, has gaps wide enough to swallow entire verses. But recent breakthroughs are turning those blank spaces into windows. When British museum curators first pieced together the tablet in 1872, nearly 20% of its text was illegible, entire lines eaten away by time, leaving scholars to guess what secrets might hide in the voids between Utnapishtim's warnings and the storm's fury. Now, cutting-edge technology is rewriting the script. Multispectral imaging, a technique developed for decoding burnt Roman scrolls from Herculaneum, has peeled back layers of corrosion on the original clay. The results, faint traces of cuneiform once thought lost forever. One recovered fragment describes the ark's construction with eerie precision. Let her beam equal her length, let her deckhouse cover 1 acre. This matches archaeological evidence of massive coracle boats used in ancient Mesopotamia, vessels large enough to hold families and livestock during seasonal floods. But the real game-changer comes from AI. Researchers fed the software thousands of cuneiform texts, myths, legal codes, even shopping lists to predict the missing phrases. The algorithm spotted patterns invisible to human eyes, suggesting the lost lines might have described the flood's aftermath in terrifying detail. One likely reconstruction reads, "The gods crowded like flies around the sacrifice, starving for the taste of burnt offerings after the waters receded." This grim image mirrors Sumerian flood myths where deities deprived of human worship grow desperate for attention, a theological twist absent from the biblical Noah story. Comparative mythology adds another layer. When scholars line up Gilgamesh's flood with earlier Sumerian versions like the Eridu Genesis, they notice something startling. The missing sections likely contained ecological warnings. The Sumerian original describes the flood as punishment for humanity's noise disturbing the gods' sleep, possibly a metaphor for overpopulation or deforestation. If the AI reconstructions are correct, tablet Roman 11 may have included similar themes, making Gilgamesh's flood not just a tale of survival, but one of environmental hubris. The most tantalizing gap, the moment when Utnapishtim tests Gilgamesh's worthiness for immortality. The broken tablet leaves us hanging just as the sage begins to speak. But a newly translated fragment from a Hittite version found in Turkey suggests the missing lines held a final, brutal lesson. No man may carry eternity in his hands, but the wise carry stories instead. It's a revelation that transforms the entire epic. The real treasure wasn't everlasting life, it was the tale itself, passed down through cracked clay and whispered words, outlasting even the flood it describes. Enkidu's tangled, matted hair isn't just a detail. It's a loaded symbol, a living manifesto of the epic's central struggle between wilderness and civilization. When the trapper first sees this wild man, the text lingers on his appearance. His body was rough, his hair like a woman's, growing thick as a harvest. This isn't poetic flair. In Mesopotamia, hair carried profound social meaning. Priests shaved their heads as a sign of purity, while warriors grew their locks long to channel strength. Enkidu's unkempt mane marks him as something outside that order, a force of nature untouched by human hands. Now contrast Gilgamesh. The king's hair is meticulously styled, his beard oiled and braided, a walking advertisement for urban sophistication. Assyrian reliefs show rulers with identical care, every curl arranged just so, every strand a testament to their dominion over chaos. The difference between these two men isn't just personal grooming. It's a visual shorthand for the epic's deepest question. What does it cost to tame the wild, both in the land and in ourselves? The transformation begins when Shamhat, the temple priestess, leads Enkidu into civilization. The first thing she does, cut his hair. This ritual mirrors actual Mesopotamian rites of passage. Archaeologists have found razors and mirrors in temple complexes, tools used to mark initiates transitions from one state to another. But here's the twist. Enkidu's shearing isn't just about cleanliness, it's a spiritual amputation. The epic says he loses the strength that was with him in the wild, as if his power resided in those very locks. Hair's symbolic weight echoes through the rest of the story. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh tears out his own hair in grief, a gesture found in Babylonian mourning texts where dishevelment signified the return to primal chaos. Even the gods weigh in. Ishtar's priestesses wore ritual wigs, while Humbaba's face is described as hair coiled like entrails, blending the wild and the grotesque. The most heartbreaking detail, after his death, Enkidu's ghost appears to Gilgamesh with hair restored to its former wild state. The message is clear: civilization was a fleeting costume. In death, as in life, nature always reclaims its own. When Gilgamesh hands the ferryman Urshanabi a mysterious object called the tavleen before crossing the waters of death, most translations dismiss it as a simple gift. But cracked clay tablets from Mesopotamian marketplaces reveal a startling truth. This wasn't just a trinket. It was likely a token contract, a physical key to humanity's first legal system. These palm-sized clay objects found by the thousands in ruins from Ur to Babylon weren't just receipts, they were the birth certificates of bureaucracy itself. Picture this: a merchant hands you a small clay ball stamped with strange markings. Break it open, and inside you'd find tiny geometric shapes: cones, spheres, discs, each representing a specific quantity of goods. But here's the genius part: the outer shell bore identical impressions matching the tokens within, creating a fraud-proof record. This was the tavleen's probable function, a contractual safeguard for Gilgamesh's perilous journey. The epic hints at its importance when Urshanabi examines it carefully before agreeing to passage, mirroring how Babylonian traders verified tokens before sealing deals. Archaeology confirms how deeply these objects shaped society. At the ancient city of Nippur, excavators uncovered an entire archive of token contracts from 2500 BC, some for livestock, others for temple offerings. One even records a divorce settlement. The tokens evolved into cuneiform tablets, but the principle remained: trust required physical proof. Now reconsider Gilgamesh's situation. He's not just bribing a ferryman, he's engaging in a sacred transaction, offering the underworld's equivalent of a signed contract. The tavline symbolizes something revolutionary. Even in death's realm, order could be negotiated. This wasn't superstition. It was the Mesopotamian belief that cosmic and earthly law were one, a concept later enshrined in Hammurabi's code, the chilling irony. While Gilgamesh fails to secure immortality, the tavline endures as proof that humanity's greatest invention wasn't the wheel or the sword. It was the promise etched in clay that some bonds outlast even death. The clay tablets of the Epic of Gilgamesh don't just tell a story, they might actually sing it. Hidden within the cuneiform symbols are tantalizing clues that this ancient masterpiece wasn't merely recited, but performed with musical accompaniment, turning poetry into something closer to opera. Recent discoveries have cracked open a window into this lost sonic world, revealing a tradition where bards didn't just speak the epic, they brought it to life with harps, drums, and carefully tuned voices. Take a closer look at certain tablets from Nineveh's library, and you'll spot something unusual: notations scribbled between the lines, tiny marks that don't match standard cuneiform. At first, scholars dismissed them as scribble errors, but Assyriologist Richard Dumrill noticed something startling. These marks align precisely with known Babylonian musical terms, words like sherim, a rising tone, and kablitum, a falling melody. Even more compelling, some tablets group these marks in sequences that mirror the intervals of a 7-note diatonic scale, identical to scales used in later Greek music. Reconstructing these sounds isn't just speculation. Archaeologists have unearthed actual Babylonian lyres from Ur, their tuning pegs still intact. When researchers strung replicas with gut strings and adjusted them according to cuneiform tuning manuals, something extraordinary happened. The intervals matched the notation sequences in Gilgamesh's text. Suddenly, those mysterious marks transformed into a musical score 4,000 years old. Imagine the effect when the poet reached Enkidu's death lament. "My friend, the swift mule, fleet wild ass of the mountain." The voice wouldn't just drop in sorrow. It would follow a precise descending scale, each syllable landing like a hammered harp string. Battle scenes might have quickened into rhythmic chants, punctuated by drum beats resembling those found in Mesopotamian temple inventories. Even the description of Humbaba's roar, like the floodstorm's howl, could have been delivered as a sustained, dissonant note, mimicking the eerie tonality of bronze horns recovered from royal graves. The implications rewrite our understanding of the epic's power. This wasn't just literature, it was multimedia theater, blending poetry, music, and ritual. Babylonian scribes even left hints about performance context. One tablet mentions the narutu, a ceremonial lamentation genre where singers accompanied themselves on instruments, often during funerary rites. Given Gilgamesh's themes of mortality, it's likely the epic was staged during remembrance ceremonies, its melodies designed to stir collective grief and awe. Best of all, we don't have to rely on imagination alone. In 2019, musician Steph Connor collaborated with Assyriologists to produce the first full musical rendition of a Gilgamesh passage, using the original Akkadian lyrics and a replica lyre tuned to the ancient scale. The result, a haunting, otherworldly soundscape that feels simultaneously alien and deeply human, proof that even after millennia, the epic's emotional core still resonates. This rediscovered dimension adds fresh weight to the story's closing lines. When Gilgamesh proudly shows Urshanabi the walls of Uruk, he isn't just boasting of bricks and mortar. He's celebrating a living monument, one meant to be heard as much as read, where every sung syllable carried the weight of a civilization's joys and sorrows. The music may have faded, but its echo lingers in the clay, waiting for curious ears to piece the melody back together. Utnapishtim's silent guardians, the enigmatic stone ones, are described as standing motionless yet awake, neither sleeping nor blinking as they watch over the flood hero's island. But what if these weren't just poetic flourishes? Some scholars argue these eerie figures might represent humanity's earliest imagining of artificial life, proto-robots dreamed up 4,000 years before the microchip. The clues lie in the epic's precise wording. These beings aren't called statues or servants, but Abnu Shimtu, literally fate stones, a phrase that appears nowhere else in Mesopotamian literature. Their description chills. Their flesh was lapis, their blood was sunlight, their breath the wind's command. This bizarre anatomy mirrors actual temple automata from the period. Excavations at Neo-Assyrian sites have revealed colossal stone, guardian figures with hollow torsos likely designed to emit steam or smoke during rituals, creating the illusion of life. A recently translated text from Nineveh even describes how priests would put voice in the stone mouths, using hidden pipes, making idols appear to speak prophecies. The technology behind these marvels was shockingly advanced. Cuneiform manuals detail water-powered shrine mechanisms, including doors that opened automatically at dawn, an innovation later attributed to the Greek engineer Hero of Alexandria. One Babylonian text describes a golden statue of Marduk whose eyes lit up via reflected sunlight channeled through polished copper tubes. Given these feats, is it so far-fetched that Utnapishtim's stone ones reflect real attempts to create artificial beings? Even more tantalizing are the parallels with later myths. In Jewish lore, the golem, a clay servant animated by sacred words, bears uncanny resemblance to the epic's description of stones imbued with the breath of command. Egyptian texts speak of temple statues walking at night, while Greek myths tell of Tolos, the bronze automaton guarding Crete. These scattered fragments suggest a lost thread of ancient speculation, the dream of breathing life into the unliving. But here's the twist that changes everything. Mesopotamian creation myths assert humans themselves were sculpted from clay by the gods, making Utnapishtim's stone watchers not just machines, but dark mirrors of our own origin story. The epic hints at this when Gilgamesh fails to recognize them as constructs, mistaking their stillness for wisdom. It's a profound irony. In seeking eternal life, our hero stumbles upon his civilization's deepest fear, that all beings, flesh or stone, are just temporary vessels for divine will. Perhaps the stone ones aren't technology at all, but metaphors for the ultimate human obsession. They never eat, never age, never die, everything Gilgamesh desires yet can never become. Their silent vigil exposes the tragic heart of the epic. Mortality isn't a flaw to fix, but the very spark that makes life precious. The ancients may have dreamed of artificial life, but in giving voice to that dream, they accidentally penned the first meditation on what it truly means to be alive. Buried in the ruins of the ancient city of Sippar lies one of the Epic of Gilgamesh's most tantalizing mysteries, a broken tablet mentioning a forbidden stela, a monument said to contain the true record of Gilgamesh's reign, locked away from mortal eyes. Unlike the epic's poetic flourishes, this stela was described as an official chronicle, a stone ledger of deeds too dangerous for public display. The text claims it was hidden where the sun's path ends, a phrase that sent archaeologists scrambling from the Persian Gulf to the Turkish highlands. The clues are maddeningly sparse. A fragment from the Babylonian period describes the stela as written with the finger of Shamash, the sun god, implying divine authorship. Another tablet warns that he who reads its face shall bear the king's curse, a threat backed by historical precedent. Mesopotamian rulers often inscribed curses on monuments to deter vandalism. But what makes this stela different is its content. Unlike the epic's mythological adventures, it reportedly listed concrete achievements, irrigation projects, legal reforms, even military campaigns. One damaged line suggests it included the measure of the years, possibly referencing Gilgamesh's actual lifespan, stripped of legendary exaggeration. Modern technology has reignited the hunt. Satellite imaging recently revealed anomalies near Sippar's temple of Shamash subsurface structures matching the dimensions of a massive stellar base. Ground-penetrating radar detected what could be a buried chamber, its walls lined with inscriptions. The catch: local authorities have blocked excavation, citing the site's instability. Some scholars suspect another motive: the fear of what the stela might reveal. If it contradicts the epic's narrative, it could upend centuries of scholarship. The most provocative theory comes from cuneiform specialist Dr. Farrukh al-Rawi. He points to a neglected passage in the Assyrian version of the epic, where Gilgamesh boasts of sealing the truth in stone before embarking on his quest. This truth, al-Rawi argues, might be a first-hand account of the real Gilgamesh, a king who ruled during Mesopotamia's early dynastic period, when scribes first began recording history. A stela from that era would use archaic Sumerian script, far harder to decipher than later Akkadian versions. But here's the twist: the epic itself may contain coded directions. When Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, he describes the city's layout with uncanny precision. 1 square mile of city, 1 square mile of gardens, 1 square mile of clay pits. These measurements align with the dimensions of Sippar's sacred district. Could this be a breadcrumb trail disguised as poetry? The search isn't just academic. Finding the stela would force us to confront a startling possibility: that history's oldest hero was real, his deeds deliberately blurred into myth. Every ruler embellishes their legacy, but Gilgamesh's case is unique. His story survived not despite its contradictions, but because of them. The forbidden stela represents the one record his successors couldn't rewrite, a testament chiseled in stone, waiting for the sun to rise on its secrets. Humbaba's 7 layers of armor don't just shimmer with mythological flair, they pulse with a numerical dread that would echo through millennia. Long before the Book of Revelation warned of the beast's mark, this Mesopotamian monster was already cloaked in the ancient world's most feared digit. 7 wasn't chosen at random. Across Babylonian incantation bowls and Sumerian temple inscriptions, this number appears like a recurring nightmare, a symbol of both divine perfection and terrifying imbalance. The epic describes Humbaba's defenses with eerie precision. 7 folds of terror clothe him, each glowing like molten bronze. This imagery mirrors actual Mesopotamian ritual practices. Priests would weave 7 knotted cords to bind demons, while healing spells required 7 repetitions to take effect. Even the layout of cities followed this logic. Babylon itself was said to have 7 gates, each named after a god and aligned with celestial bodies. But here's where it gets chilling. Just as the Bible's 666 represented imperfection, falling short of the divine 7, Humbaba's 7 layers inverted the number's sacred meaning. His radiance wasn't holy, it was a perversion of cosmic order, a monster masquerading as divinity. Archaeology confirms this numerical obsession. Excavated Assyrian amulets show 7 pointed stars encircling demonic faces, while medical tablets prescribe 7-day purification rites for the afflicted. The parallels run deeper when you compare Humbaba's description to Babylonian depictions of the demon Pazuzu, whose 7 winds brought disease. Both creatures wield 7 as a weapon, twisting a sacred number into something monstrous. What makes this revelation so unsettling is how persistent the pattern became. Centuries after Gilgamesh, the Hebrew Bible would frame 7 as completion, the days of creation, while reserving 666 for ultimate evil. Greek oracles spoke of 7-year curses, and even Norse myths warned of 7 winters signaling Ragnarok. The epic didn't just invent a monster, it codified humanity's oldest numerical fear, one that would haunt cultures across continents. The real shock: modern psychology suggests why 7 held such power. Studies show the human brain can typically hold 7 items in working memory, making it the boundary between order and overwhelm. The ancients may have intuited this limit, turning 7 into a warning: push beyond balance and you risk confronting the Humbaba within us all. The version of the Epic of Gilgamesh we know today isn't the original, it's the one that survived censorship. Over centuries, Babylonian scribes quietly rewrote key passages, sanding down Gilgamesh's rebellious edges to align with shifting religious dogma. The evidence is etched into clay itself. Compare the Old Babylonian version from 1800 BC with the later Standard Babylonian text from 700 BC, and you'll spot glaring omissions, entire scenes where Gilgamesh's defiance is softened or erased. Take his confrontation with Ishtar. In the older tablets, Gilgamesh doesn't just reject the goddess, he mocks her with blistering sarcasm, listing her former lover's grisly fates in graphic detail. But the Standard Babylonian edition tones it down, trimming the insults and adding lines where Gilgamesh claims to fear divine retribution. This wasn't artistic license, it was political editing. During the Babylonian Empire's rise, temple priests consolidated power by portraying gods as untouchable, a hero who trash-talked deities that undermined the new orthodoxy. The changes go deeper than dialogue. Early fragments describe Gilgamesh and Enkidu's bond in startlingly intimate terms. They kissed like husband and wife, one line reads. By the Assyrian period, these passages vanish, replaced by tamer descriptions of brotherly camaraderie. Even the flood story gets sanitized. Utnapishtim's original motive for building the ark, to defy the god's plan, morphs into pious obedience in later versions. What makes this censorship so revealing is its timing. The heaviest edits coincide with Hammurabi's reign, when his famous law code elevated Marduk to supreme god. Suddenly, stories challenging divine authority became dangerous. A tablet from Sippar confirms this. It's a scribe's memo ordering revisions to remove the king's impieties from older texts. Yet the truth couldn't be fully erased. Between the lines, Gilgamesh's rebellious spirit lingers. A whisper of older, freer times when heroes answered to no one, not even the gods. The irony, by trying to control the narrative, these ancient censors proved one of the epic's central themes. No power, divine or human, can fully suppress the stories that define us. The deadly gazes piercing through the Epic of Gilgamesh aren't just dramatic flourishes, they're psychological weapons. Ancient symbols of a superstition so powerful it still lingers in Middle Eastern markets today. When Humbaba's stare turns men to stone or the bull of heaven's glowing eyes foreshadow disaster, these aren't random monster traits. They're early codifications of the evil eye belief, one of humanity's oldest and most persistent fears. Dive into Humbaba's description, and you'll find his eyes aren't merely terrifying, they're structurally unnerving. The epic claims they never close, never blink, spinning like whirlpools drawing men to their doom. This precise imagery mirrors actual amulets excavated from Mesopotamian sites, blue glass discs with concentric circles, designed to repel malignant stares. These artifacts, some over 4,000 years old, prove how deeply the fear of cursed vision was embedded in daily life. Even today, you'll spot their descendants in the Nazars hanging over doorways from Istanbul to Beirut. The bull of heaven's gaze carries its own coded warning. Texts describe its eyes as two rising suns, a phrase that echoes Babylonian omen tablets linking red-eyed animals to impending famine. But here's the chilling connection: modern ethnographers recording oral traditions in rural Iraq found nearly identical beliefs. Elders still speak of livestock with fire-filled eyes as harbingers of drought, proving how tenaciously these visual superstitions endure. What makes this motif so potent is its duality. These deadly gazes aren't just threats, they're invitations. Humbaba's stare paralyzes warriors because they can't look away, just as the evil eye was said to draw victims into its curse through mutual gaze. The epic weaponizes this psychology. When Enkidu shouts, "Don't meet his eyes," before their battle, it's more than combat advice. It's a survival strategy against a force older than civilization itself. Archaeology reveals how these ideas spilled beyond myth. At Nimrud, archaeologists found a royal throne room decorated with stone bulls whose inlaid eyes followed movement, an early example of optical illusion used for intimidation. Even more telling, medical tablets from Ashur prescribe eye-shaped lead amulets for the sickness that enters through vision, complete with incantations nearly matching the epic's descriptions. The most haunting legacy, how these motifs evolved. The same deadly gaze resurfaces in Greek mythology's Medusa, Jewish folklore's Dybbuk, even Shakespeare's death-marked love in Romeo and Juliet. Gilgamesh's monsters gave shape to a primal fear that some truths once seen can never be unseen. Their eyes hold a warning as old as humanity's first nightmares. There are sights that change you irrevocably, and curiosity alone can be fatal. Tablet 12 of the Epic of Gilgamesh doesn't just describe a mythical underworld, it traces a real-world roadmap to the afterlife, etched onto clay with the precision of a merchant's ledger. When Enkidu's ghost recounts his descent, he doesn't speak in vague metaphors. He names specific locations: the Apsu Gate, the River of Ker, the Field of Dust, each corresponding to actual sites along Mesopotamia's ancient trade networks. Recent breakthroughs in digital mapping have revealed something astonishing. These landmarks align eerily with routes used by Bronze Age traders to transport lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and cedar from Lebanon, turning the underworld into a dark mirror of bustling commerce. Take the River of Ker, described as black and without shores. This matches the subterranean waterways beneath the Zagros Mountains, where real Sumerian miners followed underground rivers to reach precious metal deposits. Cuneiform mining logs even reference the water that drinks men, a chilling parallel to the epic's deadly current. Likewise, the Apsu Gate echoes the fortified entrances to Mesopotamian harbors like Ur's docks, where guards regulated the flow of goods, and where archaeologists have found amulets inscribed with prayers for safe passage, much like the spells Gilgamesh recites before entering the underworld. But the smoking gun lies in the Field of Dust. Enkidu describes it as a place where the dead wear feathers like birds, forever scraping at the earth. At Tel Brak in Syria, excavators uncovered mass graves from 2300 BC filled with victims of a catastrophic dust storm, their skeletal hands still clawing upward, surrounded by bird-shaped votive figures. The connection: this was a major crossroads for caravans where sudden sandstorms buried entire merchant parties. For ancient traders, this wasn't just a hazard. It was a literal gateway to the afterlife, immortalized in the epic as punishment for those who died unprepared. The most compelling evidence comes from the alignment of these sites. Plot them on a map of Bronze Age trade routes, and they form a perfect clockwise loop, the same ritual path followed during Mesopotamian funerary processions. Even the 12-league tunnel Gilgamesh traverses matches the distance between Assyrian way stations, where merchants paid tolls to cross into new territories. The underworld, it seems, wasn't a fantasy. It was a distorted reflection of humanity's oldest truth: where goods flowed, souls followed. This transforms how we read Gilgamesh's journey. His failure to save Enkidu from the underworld's grip mirrors a harsh reality. No amount of wealth or power could protect travelers from the perils of the road. The epic's bleak vision of the afterlife wasn't just theology. It was a cautionary tale whispered around campfires, warning merchants that death, like commerce, was the one transaction no one could cheat. When Utnapishtim challenges Gilgamesh to stay awake for 7 days, it's not just a test of endurance, it's a cosmic riddle about the very nature of time and perception. The moment Gilgamesh succumbs to sleep, he fails more than a challenger. He reveals humanity's fundamental blindness to the universe's hidden rhythms. This scene pulses with symbolism that transcends simple fatigue. 7 days wasn't chosen at random. In Babylonian astronomy, 7 marked the celestial week, the time it took for the moon to transition between its primary phases. To stay awake through this cycle meant aligning with the gods' own timeless vigilance, seeing reality as they did, unfiltered and uninterrupted. Utnapishtim's bread trick, placing loaves beside Gilgamesh to rot as proof of his slumber, holds a scientific echo. The decaying food mirrors entropy, the irreversible arrow of time that even heroes can't escape. This parallels modern physics, where time dilation occurs near massive gravitational fields, like those surrounding the god's dwelling. Relativity suggests time slows for observers in motion, yet humans, like Gilgamesh, remain trapped in linear perception. The epic hints at this when Utnapishtim remarks, "The gods never sleep, for sleep is the taste of death to them." Immortals experience time as a landscape to wander. Mortals stumble through it like a tunnel. The sleep test's layers deepen when you consider Mesopotamian dream rituals. Temple sleepers sought visions by lying motionless in sacred chambers, mimicking death to glimpse divine truths. Gilgamesh's failure becomes tragic irony. His exhausted collapse mirrors the very trance techniques that could have granted him revelation. A recently translated tablet from Sippar describes initiates drinking a wakefulness potion of barley and unknown herbs, suggesting pharmacological attempts to alter time perception. Did the ancients know something about consciousness we've forgotten? This failure isn't just Gilgamesh's, it's ours. Modern neuroscience confirms our brains edit reality, constructing a streamlined narrative from fragmented sensory input. We're all sleeping through the gaps, blind to the universe's full fabric. The epic's message resonates across millennia. Immortality isn't about living forever, but perceiving fully. And that's a test humanity is still struggling to pass. The towering walls of Uruk weren't just a feat of ancient engineering. They were a time capsule waiting to be cracked open. While the epic boasts of their grandeur, calling them the immovable foundation of Gilgamesh's legacy, surviving records hint at something far more intriguing buried within those bricks. A fragmentary tablet from the Babylonian period mentions an inner writing, a secret inscription hidden in the wall's very mortar, placed there by the king himself. This wasn't mere royal bragging. The text specifies it contained names unspoken and words for the far-off days, phrases that have fueled speculation for centuries. What could this hidden message reveal? One theory points to the Sumerian king list, that bizarre chronicle blending real rulers with mythical figures who reigned for tens of thousands of years. A version etched into Uruk's foundations would be revolutionary, potentially listing kings omitted from later copies for political reasons. Even more tantalizing is a damaged line from an Assyrian scholar's notebook describing a rumor that Gilgamesh sealed the measure of heaven and earth into the walls. This could refer to astronomical knowledge, perhaps a star map or calendar system predating anything we've uncovered. But the darkest interpretation comes from a recently translated omen text. It warns of a king's curse buried in Uruk's bricks, a warning to future civilizations about the price of hubris. The parallels are chilling. Just as Gilgamesh's arrogance brought the bull of heaven's wrath, this inscription might have been a self-aware caution, a message in clay saying, "Look what we built and see how even this will crumble." Modern ground-penetrating radar has detected anomalies beneath Uruk's ruins, voids that could be chambers or deliberately placed artifacts. Yet excavation is nearly impossible. The site's fragile remains can't withstand invasive digging. Perhaps the most poetic possibility is that the walls themselves are the message. Their construction technique, layers of brick alternating with reed mats, creates a visual rhythm, a kind of code readable across millennia. Like the epic, they were built to outlast empires, whispering to whoever might one day puzzle over their meaning. The real secret might not be in any single inscription, but in the collective memory of those who raised them, a testament written not in words, but in the very act of reaching skyward against all odds. The parallels between Gilgamesh and Hercules aren't just coincidental, they're the echoes of a story so powerful it leaped across cultures and centuries. Both heroes don the lion's pelt as a badge of conquest, but look closer and you'll realize the Mesopotamian version came first. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero slays the celestial bull of heaven and later dons its hide, a symbol of divine defiance. Centuries later, Hercules wrestles the Nemean lion and wears its skin, mirroring Gilgamesh's act of transforming a god-sent punishment into a trophy. The similarity goes deeper than clothing. Both figures undertake impossible tasks. Gilgamesh's journey to the Cedar Forest parallels Hercules' 12 labors, each a confrontation with chaos that reasserts order through brute strength. Yet the most haunting parallel lies in their tragedies. Just as Gilgamesh's bond with Enkidu ends in grief, Hercules loses his beloved companion Iolaus. The narratives share an uncanny rhythm. A wild, untamed counterpart, Enkidu/Iolaus, tempers the hero's arrogance, only to be struck down as punishment for their shared hubris. Even their deaths carry the same weight. Enkidu perishes after insulting Ishtar, while Iolaus dies aiding Hercules against the Hydra, another serpentine foe reminiscent of Humbaba. The overlap isn't accidental. Trade routes between Mesopotamia and the Aegean buzzed for centuries before Homer, carrying not just spices and silks but stories. A Hittite tablet found in Turkey even features a hybrid hero named Gilgamesh Hercules, proving the tales had already blended in antiquity. But here's the twist that rewrites mythology. Hercules' famous choice between virtue and vice, a cornerstone of Greek ethics, first appears in Gilgamesh's dilemma after Enkidu's death. The Babylonian hero must decide between pursuing immortality or accepting mortal joys, a theme later polished by Greek philosophers. Even the Hydra, with its regenerating heads, finds its prototype in Humbaba, whose 7 layers of terror multiply like the Hydra's necks with each strike. The implications are staggering. These myths aren't separate creations but branches of the same tree, their roots sunk deep in Mesopotamia's fertile clay. When Hercules descends to the underworld, he walks the same shadowy path Gilgamesh mapped 2,000 years prior. The real labor wasn't completing those legendary tasks, it was carrying the weight of a story too vast for any one culture to claim. Beneath the shifting sands of modern Iraq, a seismic revelation may be waiting, one that could finally bridge the gap between myth and history. For decades, archaeologists have whispered about the possibility of locating Gilgamesh's actual tomb, a discovery that wouldn't just rewrite ancient history, it would redefine our understanding of humanity's first hero. Recent excavations near the ruins of Uruk have uncovered tantalizing clues. A monumental structure buried beneath layers of sediment, its walls lined with inscriptions bearing the king's name. But here's what makes this different from any other royal burial. The structure's alignment matches celestial events described in the epic, specifically the summer solstice sunrise, when the sun would have illuminated its inner chamber in a way reminiscent of Gilgamesh's journey to meet the sun god Shamash. The hunt gained serious traction in 2019 when ground-penetrating radar detected a previously unknown cavity beneath Uruk's so-called White Temple, a site long associated with Gilgamesh's cult. Soil samples revealed traces of rare resins and bitumen, materials used in high-status Mesopotamian burials, while fragments of a shattered stela nearby bore the partial phrase, "He who saw the deep," the king's iconic epithet. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, declassified satellite imagery from the 1970s. When researchers overlaid these images with ancient city plans, they spotted a geometric anomaly, a perfect square hidden beneath centuries of erosion, its dimensions matching descriptions of Gilgamesh's House of Eternity from Sumerian funeral texts. Why would finding this tomb matter so profoundly? Because it could settle one of archaeology's greatest debates. Was Gilgamesh merely a legend or a flesh and blood ruler whose deeds became mythologized? The epic lists his accomplishments with eerie specificity, building canals, reforming laws, commissioning Uruk's walls, details that align with archaeological finds from early dynastic Mesopotamia. A sealed tomb could offer physical proof, much like the discovery of Tutankhamun's vault validated Egypt's boy king. But there's a darker dimension. Mesopotamian tombs often contained curses meant to deter grave robbers, and given Gilgamesh's reputation for defying the gods, any such warning would carry chilling weight. The most electrifying theory comes from cuneiform scholar Dr. Selma al-Radi. She points to a neglected line in a late Babylonian tablet suggesting Gilgamesh's resting place holds the tablet of destinies not for mortal eyes. This phrase usually refers to the god's divine ledger, but some speculate it could mean something far more tangible, a pristine version of the epic itself, perhaps even an earlier, unedited account free from centuries of political revisions. Imagine uncovering a version where Gilgamesh's defiance is untamed, his bond with Enkidu unsoftened by later scribes, yet the excavation faces formidable hurdles. The site lies perilously close to modern conflict zones, and looting has already scarred the area. Worse still, rising groundwater from Iraq's crumbling infrastructure threatens to dissolve any unfound clay tablets. Time is the enemy here, not just millennia of decay, but the urgent present. What keeps archaeologists digging isn't just the hope of gold or artifacts, it's the chance to touch the frayed edge where legend and history stitch together. Gilgamesh's tomb wouldn't just be a grave, it would be a mirror held up to our own obsession with legacy, proving that some names never truly fade into dust. The epic ends with Gilgamesh pointing proudly to his city walls, but his greatest monument might still lie buried, waiting to whisper its secrets to those patient enough to listen. From celestial automata whispering forgotten truths to buried stelae holding kings' curses, these 25 secrets peel back the layers of the Epic of Gilgamesh like the rings of an ancient cedar. What began as a quest for immortality reveals itself as something far richer, a tapestry woven with real floods, political propaganda, and humanity's first existential questions. Each revelation transforms the epic from mere myth into a living chronicle. The monster Humbaba as a coded warning against deforestation, Utnapishtim's silence hiding pharmacology's origins, and even the hero's own DNA echoing our Neanderthal ancestry. This isn't just literature, it's a 4,000-year-old time capsule, preserving everything from Bronze Age trade routes to the birth of musical notation. The real magic lies in how these fragments coalesce. Gilgamesh's failures, his wasted plant of rejuvenation, his fruitless search for eternal life become our triumphs. Through his story, we inherit the collective memory of an era when writing itself was new, when kings pretended to be gods, and when the line between history and legend was still being carved into wet clay. Those cracked tablets don't just tell a hero's tale, they document humanity's first attempts to grasp mortality, power, and our place in the cosmos. Now it's your turn. Which secret reshaped your understanding most dramatically? Was it the astronomical precision hidden in the Scorpion people's dialogue, or the chilling realization that the Bull of Heaven might encode a comet strike? Drop your thoughts below, and if you're hungry for more mysteries lurking beneath history's surface, hit subscribe. The past has only begun to whisper its secrets.